Hello everybody, I'm Mark Long. I am the co-founder of Numi and your host. Today's guest is Andy Skipper. Andy is the founder and the chief coach of CTO Craft. CTO Craft is an incredible community that Andy's built, 16,000 strong, roughly, engineering and technology leaders. Today we're going to talk about his journey. We're also going to talk about burnout, explosive growth and more. So I'm really going to love this conversation. Andy, it's great to have you here. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Andy Skipper. I am the founder and the chief coach at CTO Craft, as you say. Before that, I was a fractional CTO for a long time. And prior to that, I was CTO at various startups, including Made.com. And then at Comic Relief, I was their first CTO. And now I run CTO Craft, which is a learning community specifically, where we have CTOs, VPs, heads of engineering, et cetera, joining us, sharing wisdom, sharing knowledge, also being coached, taking our training courses, coming to our conferences, et cetera. So that's what I do.
Well, it's an amazing community that you've built. We'll dig into that in a moment. But before we get there, let's talk about burnout. I know that's something that's close to your heart. What advice would you give to CTOs to help them not to burn out?
Well, first of all, I'd advise them that it's actually much more likely that they will burn out than they might imagine. So I think many very advanced technologists get into the leadership role and they assume that they're able to sustain the high energy way of working that they have used to get to the point where they are. As they move into leadership, and they don't see the dangers of spreading oneself too thin or not forming the right relationships, not looking for help. Burning out can creep up on you much more quickly than you imagine, especially in the first role like that. So being aware of it, having people that you can talk to about it, and just being conscious of your energy, more conscious than most technologists are.
Mm-hmm. What are the data points, though? What are the signs? Because I often hear that one finds themselves burned out, but that's in a reflective moment.
Exactly.
I'm looking backwards and realized, oh God, I was a different person. And now I feel like me again. Mm-hmm. You don't know when it's happening. What can you share with us about that?
Yes, so I can certainly share what it was like for me the second time that I burnt out. And the benefit of doing that is that I was much more aware of what was happening the second time. Didn't manage to stop it from happening. But as you say, burnout is a state. It's not a process. You always look back and say, I have burnt out, rather than I am burning out. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's part of human psychology or how we've evolved. But knowing that your resources are not keeping up with the demands is actually very tough. And it's very tough when you're in a leadership role. You've had responsibility piled on you. You have expectations piled on you. You're probably putting a lot of pressure on yourself as well. So I think noticing when your energy starts to drop or when you think differently about how your work life happens. Mm-hmm. I think those are the main things that I spotted the second time that I went through.
So how do you notice when your energy drops then? Is this, you find yourself drinking more coffee? Is there something that you can contextualize?
So traditionally there are three things that you can spot. There's cynicism. So you start to feel differently, as I said, about the work that you're doing or the people that you're working with, or, the value of what you're putting into the work that you do. Then there's actual physical exhaustion. So, you can feel yourself just not having the energy to have the conversations you might have had, or to make the changes, or to do the things that you need to do to be successful as a leader. And then there's inefficacy. So you can see that there are impactful mistakes that you are making.
Yeah.
So you can see, right, I used to be very reliable. I used to get all these questions right. I used to work in this way and be right. And you can see that start to diminish as you get closer to burnout.
Uh-huh.
So and you get feedback about it as well.
It's fascinating. So cynicism, inefficacy, and physical exhaustion.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, watching brief. All right, you said that you would recommend to a CTO that they will burn out.
Yes,
So
it's much more likely.
here's a question. Is it a weakness? Is it a sign of weakness? And I think that I know it's not, but I just want to put that out there because you race to the top to have all of these responsibilities, people that depend upon you. You're climbing the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get there, it's expected that you burn out.
Right.
But all of these people that depend on you, they're looking at you to be the rock. So
Yes.
what do you say?
I think that's a societal thing as much as anything else. We've kind of been trained to believe that reaching a position where you have people that report into you that you're responsible for is a measure of success. So that's the first thing. I think society expects you to achieve that by means of being very good at individual contribution, as we call it in engineering. But we aren't necessarily trained in how to make that transition from individual contribution to managing people and having people report into you and being responsible for them and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's very little support for new managers. And that goes for founders as well. That's just not just in technology.
Yeah.
People who start businesses out of university, very, very commonly, they are not very good managers for obvious reasons. They just don't have any experience of doing it. But the ones that do succeed, they have mentors and they have sponsors and they have, people who support them and give them guidance. And very importantly, they go out looking for guidance and support.
Mm.
Technologists are not very good at going out and looking for guidance and support.
It's interesting, isn't it? It really is. And when you just talked then about mentors and guidance, what would you say is the average learning and development budget for an employee in as a percentage of their salary? 5%?
Probably less than that.
I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, most of the CTOs that we have in some of our programs, like mentoring circles and things like that, they have to fight very hard to get that budget.
Mm.
It's not vastly expensive. I'd say it's probably less than 5%, to be honest.
And it's a win when they bag a ticket that's less than $1,000 to come to your conference to learn, because whilst they're out learning, they're not back at base camp coding.
Mm-hmm.
Madness.
Absolutely.
What are the practical steps then? What's the advice that you give to these engineering leaders to help them personally to experience burnout in the right way or not to experience burnout?
So most of the work that I do as a coach, and I do still coach some of the members of CTO Craft, is with people who have burnt out. So they've kind of, and that's because of my personal background with burnout, being blunt. But for those that have already burnt out, all of them are able to look back with perfect hindsight and say, this is why I burnt out, and this was the support that I wish I had had, a year ago, 6 months ago, so I could have caught it. So those people in the community who are not being actively coached for having burnt out, the people that have burnt out are now going to them and saying, this is how it happened for me. Come and talk to me. If you don't want to talk to me, just read this and get some tips. And then the community itself is helping each other to understand the steps towards burnout and what it's been like for them. But it's also a very personal experience,
Yeah.
Some people are more sensitive to the pressures of being in leadership roles than others. Some people are neurodivergent and they have a completely different set of challenges. So the benefit of the community is in just how broad it is and how many different experiences and types of people and personalities and types of companies and founders that they've worked with and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Does your work then extend to, or maybe could you also give practical advice for the culture in the engineering team in the wider context?
Yeah, I mean, most of it happens in a trickle-down way, to be fair. We don't work directly with the individuals in the teams. But certainly the work that we do with the CTOs and the leaders is designed not just to improve their life and their working abilities and their work life, but to filter down so that they improve the lives of the people that are in their teams. Mm-hmm. So indirectly.
Okay. How about the balance then? Work, life, mental health. What strategies do you employ for yourself to be the best version of you and not to burn out again?
Indeed. So I'm doing a slightly different role now because I'm a founder. I'm running my own company as opposed to being the leader of a technology team in another company. So it's a little bit different. I have a bit more flexibility over where I spend my energy points, as it were. But I also have a very good team around me that I know excel at some of the things that I don't excel at. Mm-hmm. So I'm able to manage the weight of making decisions as to where I spend my spoons. I don't know if you've come across that term, spoons.
I haven't.
No. So everyone has a certain amount of spoons, energy-wise. Some people have more spoons than others, basically. But I am able to take more control over that. I haven't always been able to take more control over how I use my energy levels at CTO Craft as a founder. But now that I have a team and I have good advisors, I have good mentors, I have people who manage the operational and the day-to-day stuff, I have a lot more flexibility there. Mm-hmm. So it's always a challenge. Also because there's just so much that could be getting done. We're a very innovative company. We have a lot of ideas. We have a lot of creative people, and everyone in the community, 16,000 people, all have ideas for things that we could be doing as well. So a lot of the work that I do at the top of the funnel is, at the top of the pyramid rather, is triage.
Yeah.
So basically being blunt and honest about which things we should and shouldn't be doing, which things add the most value, which things are, not really particularly impactful, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that because we were talking about your international growth plans yesterday. Mm-hmm. We were talking about North America, and then we were also talking about MENA. It was really interesting to see that dynamic between the people that work for you, your position, and then I would have been one of those community people saying, "Do this." Right. So it's interesting. All right, let's just flip this around a little bit. So we've been talking about burnout, but let's talk about explosive growth. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This is possibly where you had one of the burnouts. I don't know. You can tell me in a minute. Made.com was a good example. Mm-hmm. 0 to 110 million turnover in 2 years, I think you said.
0 to 30 million in 3 years, so up to 110 people.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So from a technological perspective, what were the key things? What did you have to design, build, implement, ship to enable that platform to work?
To be completely blunt, we were exploding in terms of volume, in terms of sales so fast that really all we had time to do during the 3 years I was there was run to keep up, keep the platform running, keep it operational, which meant there was quite a lot of debt by the time I left in terms of how the platforms worked. We built it on an open source e-commerce platform, which was great and enabled us to launch very quickly. We built the initial version in 3 weeks. So we managed to get to market very quickly and then scaled on top of that and so on. But a lot of the work we were doing continuously throughout was making sure the platform could hold up. This was prior to cloud-hosted stuff, Shopify, cloud-hosted ERPs and fulfillment systems and so on. So it was all on-premise. It was all, it worked and it got them to where it was, and eventually it got them to IPO. So I think it was the right way to go about things, but it was not as innovative a place to be as I hoped it had been. Yeah.
What were the key lessons learned then?
Not a huge amount at that time. I think if we had built it now, and in fact the founder of Made.com has gone on to build another company again, doing direct-to-consumer sales stuff, this time skincare and perfumes and that sort of stuff. He has used the learnings from the technology at Made.com and has gone with Shopify, which is cloud-based. You don't have to worry about scaling, et cetera, et cetera. And I think if we were to build Made.com now, we certainly would have gone with something cloud-hosted, maybe Shopify, maybe not. But certainly that's what I think we would have had to have done. And we probably would have launched even more quickly. It just didn't exist where we built it.
What did you, when you think about the team then that you were building, so you've gone from naught to all of those employees, how did you build the structure of the team and the culture of the team to enable that growth at such a rapid scale?
Yeah, so only 15 of the 110 when I left were engineers, which was very small. It's much smaller than it should have been. But essentially, we had one squad working on one stream of work constantly, and the vast majority of that work was just scaling stuff, making sure it all stood up when we had big Groupon campaigns or whatever it was. So it was pretty straightforward in that we didn't have to worry about, team topologies or inter-team communications or whatever. It was one tight, very skilled, very, very, very talented squad. But we didn't have the complications of having multiple development teams, basically.
Did you have to put in career development frameworks? Did you have like SD 1, 2, and 3, and did you have those kind of challenges too?
No, we didn't get to that point before I left. So we had learning and development budgets and processes and an HR team that helped people with their own progression through the different seniority levels. We didn't have a career ladder. Career ladders weren't really a thing then. We had a list of ways that people could be promoted and improve their salary. But 3 years is not a long horizon, especially when at the beginning of that 3 years, the number of people in the team was 0, basically.
Yeah.
Before they got to IPO and before they sold, I think they would have had much bigger. I think they had something like 100 developers. So they definitely would have had something like that towards the end. But I was there at the very, very start when there just wasn't the need for that level of the bureaucracy, essentially.
What were the hours like then for you? Was this one of those? Was this one of those periods that did lead to burnout, or was that another period?
No, Made.com surprisingly was not one of those situations where I burnt out. It was very long hours. So I am a startup person. I like the early stages of startups, and I'd been through it a couple of times already, so I knew what to expect. But no, I pulled my first 72-hour day there. When we launched, I was there on a Saturday night at whatever it was, 11:30, kind of dealing with order flow coming through and that sort of stuff. So yeah, and I think you kind of have to be a certain type of person, have a certain type of resilience in those. I was a lot younger. This was 14 years ago. But I didn't burn out. I didn't burn out because I enjoyed it. I could see the success we were having, and I was proud of the product, and I enjoyed working with the team. It was very exciting. And yeah, I'd do it again if I were 14 years younger. But yeah, not now.
And you weren't a company founder of such a successful community that you've built as well. So should we talk about that? How did you build it? Like, just talk me through this whole process. We met years and years ago. You explained to me Sicard, which is effectively now CTO Craft. But just let's go back and just tell me the process. What happened and how did it evolve?
Sure. So after Comic Relief, I formed basically a group of fractional CTOs. So I was working as a consulting advisory type CTO, and I wanted to do fractional CTO work where I had multiple clients working at the same time, essentially. And I had a pretty big pipeline of work. So I'd done a lot of personal branding. I'd done a lot of bridge building and doing lots of people lots of favors and that sort of stuff.
Pioneering. Fractional wasn't a thing then in technology. Maybe in finance.
Potentially, I don't. I never really dipped my toes into finance, so I don't really know. But certainly, there was enough that I could start to bring other CTOs who wanted to go down the fractional route in with me, and then that became a consultancy of fractional CTOs essentially. Mm-hmm. And by the time I got rid of it, it was 85 I think fractional CTOs. And essentially, my role had become essentially a recruiter, so I was placing people. So, and I wasn't enjoying that. I wasn't enjoying the operational side or anything like that. So I merged it with a consultancy called 101 Ways.
Kelly Waters
and gang, yeah. And kind of stopped doing that so I could focus on coaching, because that was the part of the fractional role that I enjoyed. And then CTO Craft was a smaller group of people, all based in London, that I was coaching, and it's grown from that basically. So it was basically an additional resource for the people that I was coaching personally after I stopped doing the fractional stuff.
Did it just naturally evolve then, or was there some sort of moment, like a junction, and you had to make a decision?
Yeah, I'd say just before the pandemic hit. So I actually set down CTO Craft for a while I was dealing with some health issues, and I picked it up just before the pandemic and just before I moved from London to Belfast, and suddenly there was this whole lot of new interest, and then the pandemic dropped, and then that skyrocketed, and we'd already grown to about 1,500 people or so at that point. But over the first 6 months or so of the pandemic, all the CTOs were stressed. All of them were having to furlough people. All of them were losing their jobs. All of them were having to work at home with their kids running around. They were all stressed. They were all isolated. And so it just kind of took on a life of its own, essentially. And so we saw a massive growth right at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. And I, having moved from London to Belfast, had to run a lot of the things that would have been in person online, which obviously fit very well for people who were stuck at home during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And really, it's just kept going from there. I think the word of mouth stuff and the ball has kept rolling on its own. It's just kind of snowballed. And now we don't have a marketing team. We don't do outreach. It is all organic. It has just continued to grow by word of mouth, essentially.
In my mind, monetizing communities both can be quite contrary, and also strategically very challenging. I'm coming at this from a perspective of the owner of a professional services business, having worked in professional services businesses for the last couple of decades. And the strategy of I'm going to attend events or host events or sponsor events, how do you draw a straight line? How do you get a return on that investment? It's really hard. Mm-hmm. What data can you tell us about that? How have you cracked it? I'm assuming you've cracked it, right?
Trial and error. I think we're still in the process of trial and error, but we're doing okay. We're profitable. Yeah.
What do you set then as success? What are the measurables? Is it the numbers of people that attend, or is it the engagement in circles? Is it the education and the feedback loops that you get from that?
It depends on who on the team you ask. So for me, I think I'm possibly a bit too altruistic and optimistic as well. And I think for me, the success that I see is in how engaged the community is, and how many people do the word of mouth thing. So we record where new members come from, for example. But if people are coming, enjoying the free community, inviting more people into the real community, adding value to the community, and asking good questions and getting good answers and so on, and then they're taking that experience and then buying a ticket to come and see us in person, I think that's a measure of success for me. I think if you were to ask the rest of the team, they'd probably be a bit more commercially minded. It would probably be income from conference sales and learning memberships and mentoring and coaching and that sort of stuff.
So what's the one thing that you would change if you could? What decision have you made whilst with CTO Craft? If you could turn back the clock.
I think I probably left it too late to get help with that. So I ran it pretty much as an individual until 2020, so for the first 3 years or so, which meant I didn't have anyone to delegate to. I am also very creative and innovative, so I had a shed load of ideas that I would leave there hanging in the ether, sort of sitting over me saying, why haven't you done anything with me yet? Which, again, is just another type of pressure, right? But in 2020, late 2020, early 2021, I brought in a very good advisor who completely revolutionized how I thought about CTO Craft and helped me find very good operational people, so a good COO, a good finance manager. Some of the stuff that I really hadn't enjoyed about CTO Craft suddenly came off my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
So I could really focus on the supportive side of CTO Craft and the community stuff and the touchy-feely part of it, I guess, which is the part that I really enjoy.
I love it. I love the community that you're building, and I think you know that in our company we also love communities. We love sponsoring, taking part, boots on the ground, going there, making a difference, and I love seeing people learning as well. What's the two things? What's the future for you? What's the big hairy goal for next year and the year after? And here's your chance to plug it if you want to. Why would somebody join your community? What are the main benefits?
I think the main reason somebody would join our community is just to know that their challenges that they feel, that they experience, are not exclusive to them. And I think that is a big thing that new CTOs tend to feel. They tend to feel isolated, and they tend to not have people that they could bounce ideas around with. And so that's the main benefit, I think, of joining the community.
Mm-hmm.
People who can tell you about their experiences in the same sort of role, people who can commiserate with you, people who can offer you a shoulder, people who have actual kind of technical knowledge that they can share with you about how they've solved some technical issues. It just helps to be in a group of people who do similar things to you, and there are not many avenues to do that. So that's why I'd join.
Yeah. And the future for you?
So the future is more conferences, first and foremost. So we've got another conference coming up in Berlin at the end of September, and then there's something else happening in London, which we haven't quite shaped yet. So we'll be announcing that shortly. And then potentially something in Sofia before the end of the year as well, in Bulgaria. And then there'll be another London event in March, and then a North American event in May. And basically, beyond that North American event, the focus really is going to shift to building out the North American cluster. Because at the moment, it accounts for about, I think, 25-30% of the members, and the rest are almost all Western Europeans, essentially.
Yeah.
So conquering America.
Way, come on then.
25 and 26, that'll be the goal.
Well, I'm rooting for you. I'm right behind you.
Thank you.
You're doing a great thing, Andy. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
No problem.
Are you happy for people to connect with you on LinkedIn and to reach out?
Of course, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. This has been another episode of Numi Talks. Please subscribe and look out for more episodes which are on their way.